Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And on this farm he had some cows, E-I-E-I-O. With a moo-moo here and a moo-moo there, here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo-moo.
Hello, friends. In this lesson, we are going to learn about some of the idioms and expressions in American English that come from the idea that life is like a farm.
Day in the Marine Corps is like a day on the farm.
Farming has always been an important part of the history and culture of the United States. Many people who immigrated to the United States from Europe came here to find land and start farms. Also, many of the farms that are around today are family farms that have been passed down over generations. In fact, up until the early 1900s, the majority of Americans lived in rural areas and had some connection with farming. And even though this has changed a lot over the 20th and 21st century, with the majority of Americans now living in cities or suburbs, many Americans still have a cultural family connection to farming because their grandparents or great-grandparents were likely farmers. Today, most Americans still have a lot of respect and admiration for farmers and farm life. There are even places where people can go to experience what it would have been like on a farm. For example, in my home state of Minnesota, not far from where I grew up, there is a working old-time farm called the Oliver Kelly Farm, where families and school children often go to experience farming and farm life. So, because of this deep cultural connection to farms and farming in the United States, it's not surprising that we have many idioms and expressions in American English that come from farms. Our first expression here is, "Were you born in a barn?" So this is a joking way to tell someone to close the door when they have come in from outside and they have forgotten to close the door. So here we have a barn, and the barn is where the animals live. Now in a barn, there is usually some kind of a door, but it's not very tight. And usually the door is open so that the animals can get in and out of the barn during the day. So by asking somebody, "Were you born in a barn?" it just means, are you used to having the door open? So really it's just a way of asking somebody to close the door. For example, "Come on, Joe, it's freezing in here. Were you born in a barn?" The next expression here is, "Close the barn door after the horse got out." So again, in a barn, there's going to be some kind of a door, and the door will be closed to keep the animals in, for example, at nighttime when you don't want the animals getting out. But if the animal runs out, there's no point in closing the door after the animal has already gotten out. So this expression means to try to prevent something from happening after it has already happened. So there's no reason to close the door if the horse is already out of the barn. Now this expression actually can be said a number of different ways. So we can, for example, change the word door to gate. We can change the word close to lock. We can change got out to after the horse is bolted. So you might hear this in many different ways, but the main idea here is about closing or locking a gate or a door after a horse has already left or gotten out or bolted. So the horse here leaving is the main point of this idiom. For example, "Why are you getting the COVID vaccine now? You've already had COVID." That's like locking the barn door after the horse is bolted. So you can see here I've used the other version of this expression. The next one here is a cash cow. So a cow is a very common animal on a farm, just like a horse is. So a cash cow is some kind of thing that will regularly bring you money. So it's a business or product that continues to make a lot of money for a person or a company. So just like a cow would bring regular money for the farmer, so they call it a cash cow, so cash being money. For example, movie theaters don't make a lot of money from selling tickets. The real cash cow is the snacks and drinks. The theaters make most of their money from selling those things. So I don't know where you're at right now, but in the United States, it's very expensive to go and see a movie, usually because if you want to buy any kind of food or drinks, they're very expensive at the movie theater. So that's where these theaters make most of their money. It's their reliable source of income, or their cash cow. Our next expression here is till the cows come home. Till is short for until, so really it's until the cows come home. As I said before, most farms would have cows on them, maybe, one or two cows, or they could have many cows. So the cows would go out during the day and they would graze in the fields. That means they would eat the grass. And then at the end of the day, when the cows would come home, they would kind of slowly make their way back to the farm and be put into the barn. And they didn't move very fast unless they were pushed by somebody. So like if the farmer was on a horse or there was a dog or something that would herd them. Otherwise, the cows would take a lot of time getting back. They would move very slowly. So the expression till the cows come home just means a very long time, because it would take a long time for the cows to come home on a farm. For example, is winter ever going to end? I feel like we'll be shoveling snow till the cows come home, meaning we'll be shoveling snow for a long time. Our next expression here is fenced in. So farms will often have a fence on them in order to keep the farm animals inside the farm. So the fence would restrict or limit the movement of the animals. For example, the horse or the cow, they couldn't go outside the fence. The fence would keep them in. So the expression fenced in means to be restricted in some way by a person, a situation, or some rules. For example, some people avoid getting married because they don't want to feel fenced in by the commitment. So here, the commitment of marriage is like the fence. It's keeping the person inside the relationship. The next expression here is look for greener pastures. So the green area here with all of the grass and kind of the hills, this would be called a pasture. The pasture is where the animals would go to eat. So they would eat the grass or the other kinds of things growing in the pasture. So to look for greener pastures, a green pasture is a healthy pasture. So there's a lot of plants there. So you would want to find a green pasture so that your animals would have a lot of food to eat out in the field. So looking for greener pastures just basically means to move to a new place looking for better opportunities, such as a better job or a better living situation. So just like a farmer would look for greener pastures for his animals, if we're looking for greener pastures, that means we're looking for something better, a better opportunity or a better job or a better lifestyle. For example, did you hear that Heidi quit her job and moved away? She went to California looking for greener pastures and warmer weather. The next expression is don't count your chickens before they hatch. Now, this is actually a proverb. You can see the period here, so it's a complete statement. And you'll usually hear the whole thing like this. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Or sometimes people will say, don't count your chickens, expecting that you know the rest already. So a proverb doesn't really change very much at all. You might only just hear half of it, though. So this expression or this proverb means don't make future plans based on something that hasn't happened yet, especially when you expect something good to happen. So don't count your chickens before they hatch. So here's the chicken, and the chicken has eggs. Right now, this is just an egg. It's not actually another chicken because there's a little baby chicken inside of here. But the eggs didn't always hatch. So if we're looking at the eggs, we don't want to say, oh, we have 2 more chickens here, because the eggs have not hatched yet. To hatch means when the egg opens up. So there's no point in counting how many more chickens we have if the egg hasn't even hatched yet. We also shouldn't expect something to happen when it actually hasn't happened yet. For example, why are you searching for houses in Hawaii? You haven't even gotten the job there yet. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. So people will often say this if somebody else is already making plans, expecting something to happen when it hasn't happened yet. The next expression is like a chicken with its head cut off. All right, so this one's kind of a gross one. But when somebody's going to eat a chicken, they first cut the head off the chicken. before they pluck the feathers out. Now, sometimes a farmer would cut the head off the chicken and the chicken would still run around without the head on. But because it doesn't have a head, it can't see where it's going, so it just runs around like crazy. So this expression means behaving in an overexcited or crazy way, especially when trying to do too many things at one time. For example, the children made a huge mess in the house while their parents were gone. So they were running around like a bunch of chickens with their heads cut off, trying to get it cleaned up before their parents came home. So people will use this expression when somebody is just very busy doing a lot of things and they seem like they're going kind of crazy, but they don't seem to have a very good plan. Now, it's funny because actually there was a story a long time ago of a chicken that got its head cut off and still lived for like another 1.5 or 2 years. How that happened, it's kind of a long story, but they called the chicken Mike, and the chicken lived. You can see its head got cut off, but it still walked around.
The chicken lives.
The next expression here is cooped up. So this one also relates to chickens. Now, on a farm, chickens live in a little house called a coop. So the coop is where the chickens live. This is the coop here. So you'll have a lot of chickens inside this very small space here, the chicken coop. So the expression cooped up means to be kept in a closed space that feels small for a long period of time. For example, Minnesota is a beautiful place to live. The only bad part is that you feel cooped up in your house for 5 months a year because of the long winters. This expression was very popular also during COVID because, people were restricted to being at home a lot of the time, or they didn't go out very much. So they talked about feeling cooped up. The next expression is the fox guarding the hen house. So again, we're still dealing with chickens. A hen is a female chicken. So here we have the fox, and here we have the hen house, which would also be a coop. So here we're just calling it a hen house. So the hens are the female chickens, and here's their house. Now, the fox is a predator. He wants to eat the chickens. So you wouldn't have a fox guard a hen house because the fox would just eat all of the hens. So this expression means to make someone who is untrustworthy responsible for a situation. For example, never leave a child alone with fresh baked cookies. That's like leaving the fox guarding the hen house. The next expression is chickens come home to roost. So again, we're still looking at chickens here. So when the chickens would go into their hen house or their coop, we would call it roosting. So to roost just means that they're going into the hen house or the coop. So chickens come home to roost. This expression means when bad things that someone has done in the past affect that person in a bad way later. So basically, chickens will go outside and they'll walk around eating bugs and doing other things during the day, but at nighttime, you can always expect that the chickens will come back to their house. So they'll come home to roost. So chickens will always come home to roost in their hen house at night. You can always expect that to happen. So we use this expression meaning that if somebody has done something bad in the past, then it's always expected that that bad thing will affect them later on. Just like chickens will always come home to roost, bad things will always come back and affect you in a bad way later. So don't do bad things. For example, Bobby failed the test because he never studies. I guess his chickens came home to roost. And our next expression here is pecking order. So again, we're still dealing with chickens. Now chickens, when they use their beaks to poke something, so this is their beak, it's like their nose. When they use their beak to poke something, we call it pecking. So the pecking order is when chickens will peck other chickens with their beaks in order to show which one is stronger or which chicken is in charge. So that's the order. So this expression means the organization of power or authority in a group of people. For example, whenever you start a new job, You need to figure out the pecking order really quickly so that you don't make the wrong person angry.
Look around, Owen. Every living thing in this jungle is trying to murder the other. Mother Nature's way of testing her creations, refining the pecking order.
Now, moving on to another farm animal, pigs. Our next expression is a pigsty. So pigs usually live in kind of a muddy area like this. So this thing that they live in, we call it a pigsty. So this expression means a really messy place because pigs kind of live in a muddy area and it's always messy. So any place that's a messy place or dirty, we can call it a pigsty. For example, Johnny, clean up your bedroom today. This place is a pigsty. So most of the time when we use this expression, we're talking about somebody's bedroom that's very dirty. That's at least the way that I heard it growing up, is parents would always tell their children to clean up their room because it's a pigsty. Our next expression here is a tough row to hoe. Now we're moving on from animals to some of the work that's done on a farm. So hoeing is when you're digging in the dirt with a tool like this. So this tool is called a hoe. So a tough row to hoe basically means a long, difficult task. So sometimes the dirt that you're hoeing or digging up is very tough or difficult dirt. It might be very hard or very dry. And so when you have to dig the dirt, a lot of dirt like this, into a row to plant something, we'd say it's a tough row to hoe. We also can change this word tough for other words. So we can say a long row to hoe or a difficult row to hoe. For example, trying to clear away the snow in Minnesota after a snowstorm is a tough row to hoe. It could take hours just to clear your own driveway. Now you'll notice a lot of my examples here have to do with Minnesota winter and the snow because we're just finishing winter here. So this was something that was fresh in my mind. So a tough row to hoe is any task that would be long and difficult for someone. The next expression is plow ahead. So this is kind of similar to the idea with a tough row to hoe, except we're using a different tool. We're using a plow now. So to plow ahead means to continue to do something, especially when it is difficult. So a farmer, before they can plant their seeds, they have to plow the field. And sometimes this can be very difficult for the farmer to do, especially when the farmer would use animals or just his own strength to plow up the field. So to plow ahead means that you're doing something difficult, but you just keep on doing it without stopping, even though it's difficult. For example, sometimes there are jobs that you just don't want to do, but you've got to make yourself plow ahead anyway, just to get them finished. Now this next one is very similar, but there's a small difference with plow ahead. So this one is plow through, or to plow through something. So to plow through something means to work really hard in order to complete something, trying to finish it quickly. So this is the key right here, is finishing it quickly. So here I chose a picture of a tractor because a tractor is going to be able to plow much easier and quicker than if somebody is using an animal to plow. So his job is very difficult, and so it's going to be slow. But this guy here, he's going to be able to work faster and harder because he has the tractor here. So to plow through something is to work really hard, but to try and do it as quickly as you can. For example, Katie plowed through her homework after school so that she could start watching her favorite Netflix series as soon as possible. So to plow ahead just means to work very hard to finish something without stopping. To plow through means to finish something difficult, but trying to do it very quickly. The next expression is to put your hand to the plow. So we've already talked about what a plow is. It's the tool used for digging up the soil here. So if you're going to be plowing with animals or with your own strength, you're going to have to put your hands on the plow, just like this. So the expression, put your hand to the plow, means to start to do some kind of work, especially that will take weeks, months, or years to complete, because plowing would be a very long and difficult job to do. So as soon as you grab on to that plow with your hands, that means you're ready to start working. So to put your hand to the plow, put here meaning just to hold on to or to grab. Put your hand to the plow means to start doing the work, but it's going to be some kind of long, difficult work. So this expression became popular in American culture because of the Bible. Now in the Bible, there's a verse that says, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." So here in this verse, it's also using put hand to the plow as an idiom or an expression. But we can also use it, for example, to say, whenever you start something new, make sure you have the time and energy to finish it. Once you put your hand to the plow, you don't want to have to stop. So again, put your hand to the plow just means to start doing some kind of work that's going to be long or difficult. Our next expression is you reap what you sow. So this is actually another proverb. So you can see the period here, meaning it's a complete sentence. So you reap what you sow. Sowing is when you're planting the seeds. So you can see this man here is scattering the seeds. So planting the seeds, we call this sowing. To reap means when whatever you're planting here, after it's already grown and you're ready to collect the food or whatever it is you're growing, the collecting part, we call that reaping. So like if you have corn or wheat, you have to cut it down and gather it together. So that's called reaping. So sowing is planting the seed. Reaping is gathering the food after it's already grown. So the proverb, you reap what you sow, means if you do good things, you will get good things. If you do bad things, you will get bad things. So hopefully he's planting good seed right now. So if he's planting something good, like corn or wheat, then he can expect that whatever this seed is, that's what he's going to be able to reap when the time comes, when it's grown. So if this is corn, for example, then after it grows, he's going to get corn. He's going to reap corn. But if these are just weeds, for example, then if he's sowing weeds, then that means when it grows up, all he's going to reap is weeds or bad things, useless things. So you reap what you sow just means whatever the things you do, you're going to get the same kinds of things back. So if you do good things, you're going to get good things. If you do bad things, you're going to get bad things. So this one is similar to chickens coming home to roost. So when the chickens come home to roost. But when the chickens come home to roost is mainly for bad things. But you reap what you sow. It could be for good things or bad things. For example, if you're constantly gossiping about other people, don't be surprised when they start gossiping about you too. You reap what you sow. So gossip is just when people are talking about other people, usually saying negative things about them. So if you're gossiping about people, then don't be surprised when other people start gossiping about you, because you're just going to reap what you sow. You're going to get the result of whatever you were doing. And our next expression is sow your wild oats. So we can see here again this verb to sow, which means to plant something. And this time we're using oats. So the oats are the seed of the oat plant. Now, sow your wild oats is actually a really strange and interesting expression. It means to do foolish or reckless things when someone is young, often used to describe the things males do, so men, when they are teenaged or in their 20s. And it's often used to imply having many sexual relationships. So there are many different explanations for where this idiom came from. Probably the simplest one is that wild oats would be oats that are not very good. So you're not gonna get as good of a harvest when you're collecting them when they grow. So if you sow wild oats, you're gonna get kind of useless oats or not very good oats when they're all grown. So just like young men, the kinds of things they do in their teenage years or their 20s, they don't really have a good result later on. It's kind of a waste of time, basically. So this often means when they have a lot of sexual relationships, but like they don't get married or anything like that. So they don't get married, they don't have children, they just have experiences with a lot of different women. So they call this sowing their wild oats, which basically means doing foolish things that are a waste of time. For example, these days there are a lot of men who don't get married until their 30s or 40s because they are wasting time sowing their wild oats in their 20s. Our next expression is to put down roots. Okay, so when you plant something, the seed will make roots in the ground. So we say they put down roots. So when the plant starts to put down roots in the ground, that means it's going to be healthier and it's going to grow. But it also means it's going to be staying in that same place. Once there's roots in the ground, it's harder to move the plant. So this expression means to do things like buying a house, making friends, or joining clubs when you plan to live in one place for a long time. So doing these things is like when a plant puts down roots. It will make the plant healthier, but it also will make it more difficult to move the plant. So when you buy a house or make friends or join clubs, these are things that will make you have a happier life wherever you're living and make you a healthier person, but it also makes it more difficult to move somewhere else later on. So put down roots. For example, for many years, our family moved around a lot, but when we moved here, we started to put down roots, and now we feel very comfortable and at home. Our next expression is to uproot someone. So this is kind of the opposite of putting down roots. So after the plant has put down roots, like I said, it's very difficult to move the plant because it can be dangerous or harmful for the plant. So to uproot a plant basically means to pull it or dig it out of the ground after it already has roots in the ground. So up, meaning to come up out of the ground, uproot. So to uproot someone means to move somebody or something from one place to another, like moving to a new city, state, or country, especially when it is difficult or sudden for the person or thing being moved because they're used to where they are living. For example, one of the difficult things about moving to a new city is having to uproot your children from their school, their friends, and their normal routines. It can make them very sad. The next expression is to weed out something or someone. Okay, so on a farm or in a garden, if you have things that are growing, you have the things that you want to grow, and then you have the plants that you don't want to grow, which are called weeds. So you'll always have weeds in a garden or on a farm, but the weeds can make it difficult for the good plants to live. So you want to pull up the weeds. You want to weed out the bad plants. So this expression means to remove people or things from a group because they are not qualified, not wanted, or because they are bad for the group. So we're kind of thinking of these people like they are weeds. So we want to take them out of the group, so we weed out those people for different reasons. For example, employers will almost always do a background check on people before they hire them for a job in order to weed out people who have serious criminal records or drug problems. So weed out, we could use this with jobs. We could use it with sports teams. We use it with the military when we're trying to get just the best people for the military. So any situation where you're trying to get rid of people that are not wanted or not good for the group, we call it weeding out. The next expression is to separate the wheat from the chaff. So this one is kind of similar to weeding out something or someone, but it's focused on the thing that you grow. Okay, so here somebody was growing wheat. Now, if you've ever seen a wheat plant, it doesn't look like this. So the wheat is actually the kernel here, this thing that you want, and this gets ground and you can make bread out of it and different things. So you want the wheat, but you don't want all the extra stuff that's around the wheat. So this extra stuff we call chaff. So all of this is just kind of like the outside part of the wheat. So whenever you gather the wheat, you want to keep the wheat and get rid of the extra stuff or the chaff. So the expression separate the wheat from the chaff means to separate or know the difference between the good things or people in a group from the bad things or people. For example, sports teams often have very difficult tryouts because they need to separate the wheat from the chaff in order to get the best players. So the chaff here, it doesn't mean something that's bad. It just means something that's useless. It's something you don't want to keep. The next expression is cream of the crop. Now this one is actually a combination of a couple of ideas. So here we have milk. Now if you let milk sit after it's come out of the cow, then there's a thick part that will form at the top. This is the cream. So this part here at the top, you can see the difference right here. There's a separation. The cream is thicker and it's tastier, and it will always rise to the top.
But the cream will rise to the top, oh yeah.
And this cream gets used for making many delicious foods. So the cream is usually considered the best part of the milk. Now a crop is any of the food that you're gathering from farming. So whatever a farmer is planting, that is his crop, all of the food that's grown. So if we take this idea of cream, which is the best part, and the crop, which is the food that's grown, we say the cream of the crop, it means the best of the food that is grown. So this expression means the best in a group of people or things. So if you have a group of people or a group of things, then the best people in the group or the best things in the group, we would call that the cream of the crop. Now in French, they would say la crème de la crème, which would mean the cream of the cream. But in America, we say the cream of the crop because in America, a lot of people have a farming background. For example, big universities like Harvard and Yale are known for getting the cream of the crop when it comes to students who apply to those schools. Those students usually have the highest grades and test scores and the most money. So here the cream of the crop is referring to the best students of all of the students who are applying for colleges.
I am the cream, yeah. The cream of the crop!
And the next expression is to rake in something. So again, when a farmer is gathering his crop, whatever it is he's grown, depending on what it is, he might have to rake it in. So if he's growing hay, or if he's growing wheat or barley or rye, then the farmer will have to cut it, which is the reaping part, and then he'll have to gather it, which we call raking. So here you can see this farmer, he has a tool. This tool is called a rake. So there's many different kinds of rakes. But to rake it in just means that he's collecting all of the stuff that he's cut already. So here it looks like hay that he's cut. So he cut the hay, now he's raking it in. So this expression means to get a large amount of something good, like money. For example, ever since the pandemic started, Amazon has been raking in the cash because everyone started shopping from home. So when COVID-19 came, everybody's shopping from home. Amazon got a lot of the business, and so they were raking in the cash. And that made Jeff Bezos very happy. And the next expression is like finding a needle in a haystack. So we could say like a needle in a haystack or finding a needle in a haystack. We don't have to have this word here. So this is a haystack. So the stuff is hay and it's in a stack. So a haystack. This is a needle. A needle is very small and thin. So imagine if you took this and put it somewhere in this stack. It would be very difficult to find. So like finding a needle in a haystack means something that is very difficult to find. For example, trying to find a real Apple product on Amazon is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. There are so many fake Apple products or products that look like they're from Apple on there. And the next expression here is to hit the hay. So again, we're thinking of hay, just like up here, a needle in a haystack. So this is hay. Now, in this expression, a long time ago, people used to sleep on bags or sacks that were filled with hay or straw or feathers or different things like that. So you can see these people here, they are filling these bags or sacks with hay because you need to put fresh stuff in there. So the sack would be filled with hay. So hit the hay means to go to bed and sleep because they would sleep on top of these bags or sacks. So this was an old kind of mattress. So to hit the hay means to go to bed and sleep. We can also say this as hit the sack. So again, they're putting the hay inside of a sack or a bag. So we can say hit the hay or hit the sack. It just means to lie down on the bag here to go to sleep. For example, well, it's 10 p.m. and I've got to get up at 5 a.m. I think I'm going to hit the hay. And then our next expression here is to go haywire. So again, we're thinking of hay. Now, when a farmer collects hay, they will have to wrap it up in something. Now, they used to use wire like this. So this wire would be wrapped around the hay bale. So the whole thing here we'd call a bale. So when the hay would be taken out of this wire, you'd have all of this wire left over, and it would easily get tangled up like this down here. So you can see this wire, this is just a mess. So to go haywire means to go crazy or stop working in the correct way. So we usually use this to describe kind of machines or things that just they're doing crazy, weird things because the wire from the hay would get all crazy and tangled and mixed up. For example, what's wrong with my phone? It's going haywire right now. The screen is just a bunch of random colors and then it goes black. And the next one here is, this ain't my first rodeo. We can also say, it ain't my first rodeo or it isn't my first rodeo. Oftentimes you'll hear ain't. Now ain't is, it's not good grammar, but people will say it that way. So a rodeo isn't technically part of a farm, but a lot of farmers and people who live in rural country areas, they will go to these things called rodeos. Now, a rodeo is kind of a show. It's entertainment of the different kinds of things that farmers and ranchers would do. So, for example, here you can see this guy, he's riding a horse. He's trying to catch a cow. So this is something that a farmer or a rancher might have to do, catching a calf like this. Now, but he's doing it for entertainment. He's not doing it because he has to. It's a show. So there will be people around here watching. So this whole thing is called a rodeo. So at a rodeo, they might do some things like this. You'll see some people riding bulls, which are very, mean and difficult to ride. You'll see them having clowns and all kinds of things. It's almost like a circus. But it's for farmers and ranchers to kind of have fun and be entertained. So to say this ain't my first rodeo is what somebody says when it isn't their first time doing something. So a lot of the things that they do at a rodeo are kind of difficult things to do, like this is difficult to really do this. So we can use this expression when it's not our first time doing something, usually something that's kind of tricky or difficult to do. For example, it used to make me nervous when a baby would cry because I didn't know what to do to help it stop crying. However, now I have 4 children, so when a baby cries, I don't worry. This ain't my first rodeo.
Whoa! Waterproof shoes and baggies on the socks. Not my first rodeo.
And then the last one here is to buy the farm. Now this is another interesting one because there's many different explanations for where this came from. But buy the farm just means to die. Now, how does it mean to die? That's a good question. So this expression started during World War I. So one of the explanations for where it came from is that there were many men during World War I who said that if they survived and came back home to the United States, then they would buy a farm and start a farm because farming is very kind of peaceful work. You know, you're not fighting. It's calm and it's quiet most of the time. So, you know, that would be a very nice thing or a nice idea for somebody who's fighting a war. So they might say, oh, if I survive, I'm going to go buy the farm when I get home. So that's one explanation for this. But a lot of those men did die, right? So they would say, I'm going to buy the farm, but then they would end up dying anyway. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that sometimes there would be pilots and airplanes that would crash into farm fields. And so if a plane crashed into a farm field, then the farmer could sue the government and make a lot of money off of that because it would damage his crops or his buildings or whatever. So by suing the government, taking them to court, they would get money and they could use that money to buy the farm. That's the second explanation for it. And the third explanation is a farm is really a piece of land. So it's the soil in the land. And when you die, you have to buy a little piece of land to bury the body. So here, the third explanation is that the farm just means buying land, and they're talking about the place where you're going to be buried. So that would be the farm, just like here, this graveyard. So there are a few different explanations. Which one is true, I don't know, but you can just remember that buy the farm just means to die. For example, you need to make sure you have a good life insurance plan. You never know when you'll buy the farm. And that's it for this lesson. I hope this was helpful and useful for you. If you want to see any examples of how these idioms are used in real life, like in videos or in songs, just look in the description below and you'll find some links. Thanks for watching.
E-I-E-I-O, with a tick-tick here and a tick-tick there, here a tick, there a tick, everywhere a tick-tick. Old MacDonald had a farm.